Hello and welcome to Philm Phuckery, the unhinged podcast where I romanticize the villains, ship anything with queer tension, and obsess over films that are either genius or deeply cursed, sometimes both. I'm your host, Spencer Jones, and this season we're diving headfirst into the chaotic comfort that is the MCU. This week's episode is The Avengers. This is the movie where it all comes together. All of the movies we've been watching, it all comes to this climax movie. All of our heroes come together. And I'm very excited to do this episode. Because this episode is the one where they all come together, I've decided that for this week, I'm going to also be talking about the heroes as well as the villains. So we're going to start with the heroes because as I was typing out my little notes watching this movie, there were so many cool moments that I wanted to talk about, and I couldn't really find a way to fit it into the usual categories. So today we're going to be talking about the heroes, the villains, the gay undertones, the logic holes, the consistencies, the inconsistencies, and the technicalities. So CGI, makeup, hair, wardrobe, camera angles, whatever. And the most chaotic moment, of course. So starting off with the heroes, I'm going to talk about Steve first. So we see Steve on screen. He is punching the punching bag so hard that it flies off the thing, and he's so strong that he just hooks another one on. Crazy. And then Nick comes in and he's like, I need your help with something. And he's like, but it could be pretty dangerous. It could be like a lot of stuff that you're not used to, that you haven't seen before. And Steve's like, nothing surprises me. And then when they're on the SHIELD ship, I guess, and then the ship starts to come out of the water and starts flying, and Steve hands Fury the $10 because he did surprise him. I thought that was really funny. And then this kind of ties into Steve, but it's the scene after Loki has taken that guy's eye, and he's got everybody outside, and he's like, Neil. And that one old guy is like, not to men like you. And then Loki's like, there are no men like me. And that guy is like, there are always men like you. That gets me every time. That guy's a hero for real. And then Steve comes in and he's like comparing Loki to the Nazis or to Hydra. And that was powerful. For whatever reason, it's because an old guy said it. You know what I mean? He had like kind of a little bit of an accent. If it had been like a younger guy who was like, nah, bro, it's not as powerful. They knew what they were doing, obviously, but like it's a very good moment. It's a key point, I think. And then later on, Steve and Tony and Bruce are trying to figure out what SHIELD's actually trying to do with the Tesseract, because obviously they're not trying to use it for power supply, because Tony is the number one in clean power or whatever he says. And so obviously if they wanted help, they would have called him in. They didn't. So they aren't using it for power supply. So they're like, what are we using it for? Tony's bugged the thing, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Steve goes around looking for stuff and he finds like an entire bin of Hydra shit. And that must have been so hurtful for him to see that he's working with an agency that might be steering towards Hydra ideals. That must be so scary and hurtful for him. And that's so unfortunate, because where else can he go? It's been 70 years. He doesn't know anybody else. SHIELD brought him back. Where else do you go? I do love that at the beginning, Steve and Tony are so against each other. The moment that they all team up in this movie is out of necessity. It's not like they've been preparing for this team up, and they haven't been at a good rapport with each other before this. They're all just kind of getting to know each other on this giant ship in the sky. So anyway, I like that at the beginning, Steve and Tony hate each other. They're getting on each other's nerves because they stand for different things. They believe in doing things different ways. They just never really got along. And Tony's very much like, ugh, my dad always talked about this guy. And Steve is like, ugh, Tony is not following the way that it should be. So it was interesting to watch that and to know obviously where they end up, because they do end up being friends and they do end up caring for each other. And then Civil War happens and they break up, and it's so hurtful. And all I could think of was when they're like, we were supposed to do it together and you weren't there, I'll talk about it more when we get to that movie, but it's interesting to see the progression of their relationship, Tony and Steve specifically. But then kind of all of the Avengers don't get along, right? Because there's that one scene where Thor and Tony are fighting, and then Steve has to step in. They just are all butting heads, which is kind of perfect for what Loki is wanting to do. So he aced it there, my boy. But then I appreciate the way that they are forced to team up and cooperate and everything. They just have to come together for the greater good. And I thought that was really cool, and it was very bonding for them, I'm sure. And then also when Coulson dies and he's like, they needed something to believe in. And I'll talk about that later too. But I like the way that they have to come together, you know? And then when Tony and Steve are in the lab with Bruce and they're like fighting, and he's like, you want to put on the suit? Let's go a few rounds. Let's go. And then the engine blows up and Steve's like, put on the suit. And Tony's like, yup. It's just very funny. This movie is so good at balancing the drama and the action with the funny. It's so consistently funny. And I love that. So Tony, speaking of funny, he's really the comedic relief, but he's also so smart. Anyway, my ADHD king, the way that he's in the room and he's trying to cause a distraction, but I bet that's just also the way his brain works, where he's like, that guy's playing Galaga. He thought we wouldn't notice, but we did. And then he's like, how does Nick see when he's got like this eye patch covered? Maria Hill's like, he turns. And Tony's like, well, that must be exhausting. Anyway, he's doing it to distract everybody while he implants a bug to get the shield information, whatever. But I liked the way that he just kept being like, boom, 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 different ideas. So anyway, then he, later on in the movie, he was talking about how they're trying to find Loki where he might be. And he's like, well, obviously Loki's a diva. He likes the big spectacle. He likes his name written high in the sky. And then he like pauses. He realizes that that's him. Like, he just described himself, and that Loki would be at Stark Towers because Tony is also a diva, and he does in fact have his name plastered in the sky. And then when he does go to Stark Towers and he's trying to distract Loki, and Loki is trying to mind control him with the scepter, but it stops because of his arc reactor in his chest. And Tony's like, performance issues are not uncommon. He's such a little shit. I like how Tony never takes anything seriously. He's always like got a little witty thing to crack, but he always gets the job done. You know what I mean? But I love the way that he's just such a little shit, but I love him. I also love the way that Tony, he is consistently learning from his experiences. And I like that we can see that clearly throughout the MCU in the way that he keeps upgrading his suits, and then later on Peter's suits too, based on problems that he's had. So like in Iron Man 1, when he goes up too high and his suit starts to freeze, he fixes that. And then later on it helps him because Obadiah can't go up that high. And then later on in the MCU, when he goes up into space and he can't breathe, he gives Peter a suit that will help him breathe in space. You know what I mean? And that might be, I might be like tweaking it a little bit wrong, but we'll talk about it more when it happens. But I like the way that he learns and he adapts and he overcomes and he upgrades his suits and his like way of thinking. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'm going to move on to Bruce Banner now. I am not a Hulk fan. I think we know that. I don't dislike him. I just, you know, the more I watch and I empathize with him, the less this is true, but I find him to be annoying. It might just be me, but that's how I feel. My friend that I watch the MCU with, she loves him so much and she hates Loki. And every time that the Hulk is on screen, I'm like, oh, there's your boy. And every time Loki's on screen, she's like, oh, there's your boy. Because we're just so opposite in those. So anyway, while I was rewatching this and he says, I put a bullet in my mouth and the other guy spit it out, I was remembering when I watched it with her and she was like, oh, that's so sad. How come you don't like him? And I was like, I don't have to like him because he's sad. But it is a sad moment. It's very eloquently phrased. I liked that. But, you know, I don't love the Hulk. Anyway, so the scene where the Hulk and Thor are fighting and they're busting up the ship and they come up to the top floor, not the top floor, but like one of the top floors. And they're trying to get a pilot to distract the Hulk and try to get him to stop smashing shit inside the ship. And the pilot gets too close and he's like, oh shit. The Hulk jumps up on him. He's destroying the plane and everything. And the pilot goes to eject his seat, right? And the Hulk catches it. That's terrifying. Can you imagine being that pilot? And you're like, I have to get to safety. And it's already scary to eject from a plane, I'm sure, and then have to parachute down. And then this big giant monster grabs it. And you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. Am I safe or what? And he makes it. He's fine. In a weird way, though, the way that that happens and he just so perfectly catches it, I just like it fits in my brain perfectly. And I don't know how to describe it, but the way that he just like, boom, catch. I liked that. And then immediately after that, one of the guys working for Loki is like throwing a bomb trying to stop Steve and Tony from fixing the engine, and Steve jumps across the thing and smacks it so it doesn't hit anything. Just like beautiful pieces fitting into my brain, and I don't know how to explain it, but like magnificent. On another note though, talking about how Steve is jumping from all of these things on the engine and swinging from stuff, my toxic trait is really thinking I can do shit like that. I don't know what gives me the audacity, but really like put me on that engine and I'm jumping just like a super soldier. No, I'm not, but I could. No, I swear. Also, I don't know, this is like not anything important, but on the same note, when I'm in a theater seeing a play or a musical or whatever, for whatever reason in my mind, and I don't know if something is wrong with me or if this is like a normal thing, but when I'm in the balcony seats, I'm like, for sure, if I wanted to, I could jump from this balcony seat to the stage and I would make it. Physically, no. Like, I'm so small compared to the size of a theater. From balcony to the stage of the theater, I don't know what gives me the audacity to think that. Anyway, I'm so sorry. Back to the Hulk. So they're fighting the Chitauri on the street, right? And Bruce rides up on the motorcycle, and Captain America is like, it's time to get angry. And Bruce is like, that's my secret, Captain. I'm always angry. I'm going to get vulnerable with you guys for a second. When I was in high school, I was a very, very angry child. And I don't really know why. I don't remember. But I do remember that this quote, when I would watch this movie, I'd be like, yeah, hell yeah. I felt this quote deep in my soul because I was like, I am always angry. Yeah, I am always angry. And you know, when you're an angry teenager, and it might just been the hormones, you know what I mean? Like puberty, whatever. But when you're an angry teenager, you can't always be an angry teenager. You have to like be a person and like do shit. And so I remember being in high school being like, yeah, I am always angry. That is my secret. Like deep down inside of me is just a well of anger. I was like, damn, must be so nice to just like let it out and just Hulk out for a second. So anyway, I liked that quote. I've always liked that quote. That's my secret, Captain. I'm always angry. So I wanted to add that in there. I'm going to move on to Natasha now. Our first scene that we see her in is she's in the chair, she's tied up, and she's she says she's interrogating the guys, but they think they're interrogating her. First of all, badass. So cool of her. She's speaking Russian to these guys, which is so fucking cool and kind of sad when you know her backstory. But then Coulson calls her and he's like, you guys better put her on the phone or I'm going to blow this whole block up. And they're like, oh shit, here's the phone. And she's like, this moron's giving me everything. And he's like, I'm not giving her everything. I like the way that she's always in control because she's a woman and people underestimate women. She like uses that to her advantage. You know what I mean? So she's tied up in the chair, but she's interrogating them. And I love that. And then she beats them all up with her arms tied to the chair. And then casually, once she's all done, she's broken out of the chair and everything, she just picks up the phone in her shoes and she continues the conversation with Coulson. And just in general, she's so intelligent. She's so good at gaining information that she needs. And I know that that's what she was trained for, but like she's good at it. So the scene where Loki's in the big cage thing, she is trying to figure out what Loki's play is, right? She's asking him about Clint. He's talking about how he's going to make Clint do horrible things to Natasha because they're so close and everything. And then he's going to let Clint see what he's done and not under mind control and whatever. And Natasha pretends to be all sad and everything. And Loki's like, I'm not a monster. There's a different monster on this plane. And then she just calmly raises her head. She's not crying anymore. She turns around. She's like, oh, so that's what you were doing. And Loki's like, wait, what? Because usually Loki is like 3 steps ahead, but she is steps ahead of him. He's like, that's never happened to me before. And that's so cool because Loki's whole thing is being able to use his brain and plan ahead for shit like that. And the way that Natasha planned further than him is so fucking cool. And I think she needs more credit for that because that is amazing. So then later on, she does have to fight Clint. And it's actually really sad because we see her, she's on the floor shaking after the Hulk threw her to the side. She's all sweating and everything. And she has to go and fight her best friend who's been mind wiped. It's really sad. Like this girl cannot catch a break. So they're fighting, and thank God Natasha is so smart because she knows that if she hits him on his head a certain way or a certain amount or whatever, that it will knock him out of the mind control. Genius. She's so badass as well. The one scene where they're in the streets fighting the Chitauri and she is trying to get back up to Stark Towers. It's so cool the way that she jumps off of Steve's shield and up onto the Chitauri ship. She's so badass. And then after that, she's flying and Loki's ship explodes and he lands on Stark Towers. And so she does a flip off of the ship that she's on onto Stark Towers. And she does like her classic hair flip, you know? And then Loki does a hair flip too. Oh my God. They're such divas and I love it. So after that, when she's talking to Eric Selvig, and he hit his head from when he got blasted back from the Tesseract, like the power exploded and he bounced back, you know? He's trying to tell her that the scepter can probably help them close the portal and everything. And he's trying to help her fix it. And the first thing that she says to him, he doesn't really look like he's in too much distress about it, but the first thing that she says to him, and I thought this was really sweet and super telling of her character, it's that she tells him that it's not his fault because he didn't know what he was doing. I usually didn't think much of that line, but this rewatch, it clicked to me because I was like, oh, interesting that they're not talking about that at all. He's not apologizing for anything. He's not saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. But she immediately, without saying anything else, goes to reassure him first. And I think that was so heartbreaking knowing how she grew up, you know? She wasn't really mind controlled, but she was kind of mind controlled. Like she was told to do things she didn't really want to do and she was forced to, you know? She did a lot of really bad things under this mind control in quotations. So it's kind of like her first instinct is to tell him that because that's what she would want to hear in his situation. And she knows what it feels like to be in his situation. That was really, I don't know, that just got me. So anyway, I'm going to move on to Thor before it gets too sad. This movie's just so full of great quotes. The one where Thor is like, he's my brother. And Maria Hill's like, he killed 80 people in 2 days. And he's like, he's adopted. So funny. And sweet, dumb Thor, he just never learns. But it's because he loves his brother so much. And I know I already talked about this in the Thor episode, but it just continues to be true. The love for his brother outweighs the need to learn from any situation that he's in with his brother. So he comes barreling in, running towards Loki to try and get him. And Loki is obviously projecting an image of himself into the cage. So Thor gets stuck in the cage. My boy never learns. He goes barreling in, no thought. It's like he keeps forgetting what Loki's powers are, you know? And then later on, the portal has been opened and Loki and Thor are fighting at Stark Towers. And Thor's like, look around. Do you think they'll want you to be king after this? And Loki's all pretending to be sad and everything. And there's tears in his eyes welling up. And he's like, it's too late. And Thor's like, it's never too late, brother. I love you. And then Loki uses that to his advantage because he's waiting for Thor to let his guard down and then he hits him. And poor Thor, I actually do feel really bad for him. He just loves his brother so much. I just have to point this out. While they're fighting the Chitauri on the streets in New York, all I could think about was Rogers the Musical and then being like, and then get shawarma when we're done. And then they did. They got shawarma afterwards. And it's so cute. And I actually have this little Funko Pop shawarma collection. They all fit together in their little seats eating shawarma. It's so cute. I collect a lot of Funko Pops, like a lot, like too many. And this one took me a while to collect just because I forgot Loki, but it's one of my prized possessions. I love it so much. It's so cute. Them all eating shawarma. So anyway, we're going to move on to the villain. So obviously our main villain is Loki, but he is an ally of the Chitauri and working for, later at the end credit scene, we find out Thanos. I'm still confused as to how it's been like roughly 2 years between the end of Thor and the beginning of Avengers. 2 years is a long time, and I'm sure Loki is very cunning and everything, but I'm wondering how he came across the Chitauri, especially when Thor says that he's working with, I don't remember exactly how he says it, I'm so sorry, but it's something about how it's not like a realm that they're aware of or anything, like they don't know about it. So I'm wondering how Loki got there, how he became allies with them in just 2 years. It's very interesting to me. So anyway, he does come back to Earth through the Tesseract. He like uses a portal. And oh my God, somebody get my boy some chapstick and a cheeseburger because he looks sickly. He looks bad, like god awful. It's really sad. I'm glad he gets better later. Like I'm sure they nourished him somehow. But my poor boy. Anyway, and then when he's talking to Nick Fury about how he wants to rule and everything, and Nick Fury is like, we have no quarrel with you. And Loki goes, an ant has no quarrel with a boot. So cunty with his little British accent. I love it. And he talks about how he was the rightful king and he was betrayed and he was supposed to be king of Asgard. And my sweet, sweet delusional boy, he really thinks that probably. And it's kind of sad, but it's okay. We still love him. So then Loki's wreaking havoc. He's doing some villain things and he needs that guy's eye from that gala, I'm assuming, some sort of party. And so first of all, he's so bougie because he is choosing what he's wearing through magic, right? Because later on it like dissolves and he is in his like Loki getup with the horns and everything. But he's so bougie with his little like trench coat and he's got that pop of color in his scarf, you know? He just, his fashion sense, he gets it. You know what I mean? So anyway, he's ripping that guy's eye out, right? And he's smiling around and he's looking at everybody screaming and running away. I don't condone any part of that, but I love the way that he is. I don't know. I love what's wrong with him. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I love what's wrong with him. And the way that he is so happy that they're all screaming and running away. Like he didn't have to make it such a big deal, but he did, you know? I love it. And then he's outside and everybody's running around and he corrals them with depictions of himself. And he's telling them all to kneel and everything. And that old guy's like, not to men like you. Anyway, he smiles after they all kneel because he's just a little boy who wants validation. He's doing it wrong. We know. Okay. But he's just a boy and he just wants to rule. And he is happy with that. I thought it was sweet. So then a big fight happens. Loki gets taken into custody. He's put on to the big ship that they're all in the air with. And he gets put into that cage. And I love the way that Nick Fury is like, ant, boot. Loki's the ant. And the cage is the boot. I love it. And then he breaks out. Thor falls for it. Of course he does. We're not shocked. We're just disappointed probably. And Agent Coulson comes in and he's got that prototype gun and everything. And then he gets stabbed while he's monologuing to a fake apparition of Loki. I don't know what to call them. I feel like I keep calling it different things every time, but that's okay. So he's talking to a fake Loki and Loki comes up from behind and stabs him. Heartbreaking, right? We love Coulson and he just died. And it was really devastating. However, from a villain standpoint, it was kind of tough. Loki coming up from behind and stabbing him while he's talking, he had no idea that was happening. And that's why you never monologue. Never monologue. Because every time, so consistently, every movie, every show, anything, whether it's a villain or a hero, whatever, monologuing, you're always wasting time. Coulson should have shot and then said his one-liner after, because then he would know that maybe it's not the real Loki, or maybe he would have shot Loki before Loki moved or whatever. But it's so disappointing to see someone fail because they're monologuing. You know what I mean? Like, just shut up respectfully. This is not geared specifically towards Coulson, but a little bit towards Coulson, just in general, you know, never monologue. But I did like that he did get his one last hit. It kind of didn't really do much, but I like that he got to hit Loki. Like, he kind of got his revenge. And he's like, oh, so that's what that does. It is really sad, though, when Nick comes up and he's like, Coulson, you stay with me. And Coulson's like, I think I'm clocking out. And Nick's like, no, you have to stay with me. And Coulson's like, it was never going to work if they didn't have something to, and he was going to say like something to fight for, like something to redeem or avenge. And he dies. And it's so sad. He risked his life to give them something to bond over because they needed that something to bond over because they were not clicking. Anyway, back to Loki though. He's so silly. I love him. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie just because it's funny. And then I like that they bring it up later in Thor Ragnarok. The Hulk comes into Stark Towers and Loki's like, I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied. And the Hulk just picks him up and flings him around the room. And Loki is on the floor like winded and he's like, ugh. And the Hulk's like, puny god. That's funny. So anyway, I don't really want to talk about Loki too much just because I talked about him a lot in Thor and we all know my stance on Loki. But those are the main key points that I wanted to hit. However, I also think that the council was low-key a villain. I feel like the council's always kind of getting in the way of shit. You know what I mean? But this movie specifically, they're kind of the bad guys because they're literally trying to bomb Manhattan. And I see the standpoint. I see what they're getting at, but I also think that they have no faith in the people that they're working with. You know what I mean? They did not trust the Avengers at all. They were like, well, we have to bomb Manhattan because no one's going to do shit. And they're like, we're literally fighting our asses off to do shit. And they're like, bomb. I like that Nick Fury didn't really listen to them. And he's like, seeing as it's a stupid ass decision, I've elected to ignore it. I love that. But also, they send the bomb anyway. And Nick Fury's trying to shoot the pilot down, but it doesn't work. And the bomb starts heading towards Manhattan. I don't like that, obviously, because why are they bombing Manhattan? And also, the bomb is really what gave Tony his PTSD, probably, because he had to bring it up into space and he had to see space. And it's so fucked up. Like, he wouldn't have had to do that if there was no bomb. They would have just closed the portal and killed all of the rest of the aliens. But instead, Tony had to fly the bomb up into the wormhole and then be traumatized for the rest of his life. And I guess the trauma did something because he was trying to prepare for alien invasion, which eventually did happen, but he wasn't able to prepare enough. I can't talk about this right now, actually. I'm gonna really get too sad about it. We'll talk about it in Endgame. Okay, I'm gonna move on to gay undertones. And speaking of Tony, we're going to go back to our OG gay undertones because Tony and Pepper, I love them. Their little scene that they have in Stark Towers when it's finally lit up and everything. And Tony's like, I want to give you credit. Like, this is your baby. I will give you 12% of the credit. The way that they're bantering and they're razzing each other, it's so cute. And Tony's like, I'll pay for that comment in some subtle way, won't I? And she's like, it won't be that subtle. I love them so much. May that love find me. They're so cute. And then when Agent Coulson comes in and Pepper's calling him Phil, and he's like, when did he become Phil? His first name's Agent. I feel like Tony, he's very insecure, but he is confident in his relationship with Pepper. So he's like, hold on, why are you calling him Phil? But then he's like secure in their relationship. And I think that's really cute. And then Pepper and Agent Coulson are talking about this cellist girl that he was seeing. I thought that was so sweet that they're like friends. And they talk enough that Pepper would know about this girl that he's seeing. So then Tony is taking the bomb into the wormhole and Jarvis is like, should I try calling Pepper? And it's so sad. It really hurts my heart the way that Pepper doesn't answer because she's so worried seeing Tony fighting on the news that she's not looking at her phone. So he doesn't get to say anything to her. And he really thought he was going to die. Like, he almost did. And that's so scary. They all agreed that once Tony flew that up into space, that there would not be re-entry. And thank God there was. Like, he fell through right before it closed. But he really thought that he wasn't going to be able to come back. And Pepper didn't answer. And that's so sad to me. Like, I think about that all the time. And that's why I always answer a phone call, by the way, just in case. You never know who's dying. Anyway, moving on to Agent Coulson and Steve. The gay undertones are very one-sided in this one, and it's kind of sad, especially because he dies. But Agent Coulson is so in love with Steve Rogers. It's so sweet. He's like starstruck. He's got those cards that he wants Captain America to sign, and he's saying weird shit to him like, I watched you sleep. And he's like, no, wait, that's not what I meant. I was there with you when you were like under from the ice and everything. And he's like fumbling over his words. He helped design Steve's suit. It's just so relatable. I really like it. The way that he's like fumbling over himself and he's like, oh my God, I can't believe like I'm here with this person I'm so in love with, you know? I'll say it. Elizabeth Olsen is my favorite. I love her so dearly and I have for such a long time. And if I was in a room with Elizabeth Olsen, I would act exactly the same way that Coulson is acting. The way that I'd be like so nervous, fumbling over my words, saying weird shit. And I'd be like, can you please sign this thing? Please, I love you so much. It's giving gay panic. And I think it's really cute. And it's really sad that he never even really got his card signed. He's like talking to Steve in another scene and he's like wringing his hands out of nervousness. And he's just trying to make conversation and be cool and not be like, this might just be me actually. But you know, when you fantasize about meeting the person that you want to meet, like if I were to meet Elizabeth Olsen, I'm like, well, if I were to meet her, I'd be so nonchalant. I would not freak out at all because everybody freaks out and I want to stand out and I want to be different. You know what I mean? And so Coulson is sitting here talking to Steve and he's really nervous. You can tell in his body language, but he's trying to like make normal conversation with him. And I think it's so cute. And he's talking about the cards and everything. It's just so sweet. The last gay undertones that I want to talk about, and it's not really two gay undertones, it's a very bromance to me, but I think it's still really, really sweet, is the relationship between Tony and Bruce Banner. I think it's so cute because Tony is a very guarded and he's a very sarcastic and kind of a little shit all the time to everybody, right? And he's always got something little to say that like digs at people. But the way that he is so excited when Bruce Banner talks science and he's like, oh, finally someone who is as smart as me. Finally someone who speaks my language. He's so excited. He's so happy to be working with Bruce. And then he's inviting him to Stark Towers and he's like, we can play with all of my little gadgets at my house. You can come have a play date with me. And he is usually such an asshole. But when Bruce talks about how he doesn't really like turning into the Hulk and everything, and he doesn't believe that the Hulk was for anything, Tony's trying to comfort him and he's like, maybe the Hulk saved you. Bruce is like, for what? And Tony's like, well, I guess we'll find out. It was such a genuine, sweet moment that they had together. And I thought it was so cute. It's such a bromance. I don't think for me, it's a completely gay undertone, but I like their relationship. And then at the very end, when they're all going their separate ways, Tony and Bruce are getting in the car and Tony just smiles so big. I'm assuming it was going to be a long car ride and they're going to get to talk about all of these science-y, smart people things on the ride there. And I'm so excited for them to have that moment together. I'm going to move into logic holes now. I just want to talk about the continuity first before I move into the logic holes. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I like the way that Hawkeye is depicted as liking high vantage points because he can see better. Because at the beginning, he is watching over the Tesseract, but he's watching over it from a high point because he can see the whole room. He sees better that way, he says. And then later on, they're fighting the Chitauri, and he's on a high part of the building, and he's clocking every little aspect of the Chitauri because he's watching, he's surveying. That's what he does. And he notices that they can't bank worth a damn, he says. And so he's telling Tony how to defeat the Chitauri because he's watching. I really liked that. Another thing that is so continuous throughout the MCU, and I know I already kind of touched on it, but I just want to really drive it home. Thor really loves his brother. And I feel like Loki doesn't give himself room to love Thor back. I feel like he wants to, but he just can't allow himself to. And Thor never learns, and Loki will always stab him in the back, and that's just their relationship. I feel like to a certain point, Thor just becomes okay with it, you know? Which is really so sad. So then the scene where the Hulk and Thor are fighting each other in the basement parts of the ship in the sky. I really like watching them fight and knowing where their friendship goes after this and seeing them fight later on, because it feels like they become friends, but there's always that tension of I could be unified. No, I could be unified. And that's probably like a guy thing. But I love the way that Thor is always like, well, I could beat unified though. But technically the Hulk is stronger. And Thor's like, no, I won. And the Hulk's like, well, but did you though? Another continuity thing that I really like, and this is more of a recent understanding of mine because growing up with all of these movies and Endgame and everything, there's little points where Natasha will bring up how she was raised, and we know how she was raised because of the comics, right? And then Black Widow comes out later and you're like, oh shit, it was bad. So I like that they put these little things in, like when she goes to get Bruce from India and the little girl is tricking him to get him into that house. And he's like, is she a spy too? Do they start that young? And Natasha's like, I did. Oh my God. It's so sad when you know the story. And I didn't know it for a long time. I was like, wow, okay, so whatever. I would brush it off, but like, wow. Anyway, speaking of Natasha picking up Bruce Banner, last time we saw him, he was trying to meditate and he became the Hulk, and it was like 0 days without an incident. And he's also Ed Norton. But now we see him as a doctor helping sick patients in India. I just wonder what happened. What led him to this place in his life? Because he's not that kind of doctor. So I don't understand what he's doing. Like, he's helping people, and that's good. But I'm just confused on what happened in between those two things. Like, it didn't seem like that was the direction it was going. I guess that's like a big thing for me. I gotta know what happened in between. I just can't let that shit go. Another thing I really love is the way that Tony has the time and energy to develop his suits now and the arc reactor and everything. I like that he's now working on clean power as opposed to weapons. It's first of all because he's moved away from weapons as a whole as a company, but it's also because he has so much time on his hands because Pepper's now running the company. And I kind of love that for him. Anyway, the scene after Loki has told everyone to kneel and Captain America comes in and he goes to fight him. I know that it's for the drama and you can't kill a main character that way. Not in this movie, at least. But Loki can explode things with the scepter. So I don't understand why he's not doing that to Steve. It just seems like he didn't blast him once. Or maybe he did and I missed it. I would just be boom, 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 shooting, you know? That was kind of silly to me. But then Tony comes flying in with the music playing and he hacks into the Quinjet and plays music through the speakers in the Quinjet. So tough. He loves to make an entrance, and I love that for him. Anyway, so this is the movie specifically that I really just can't get over it because who pays for stuff? The entirety of New York, cars are blowing up, buildings are being torn down. The aliens are going through the buildings and they are collapsing. So I don't understand where the money comes from. I don't understand who's working to rebuild and who is compensating the people to rebuild. Like, I don't understand how the economy works that way, I guess. It's never happened to me before where aliens have come in and I've had to look into whatever. But I just don't understand who is paying for the taxis, who's paying for my apartment building, who's paying for my office space. Like, I need to know. I just don't understand how it works. But also, I was so invested in these cars blowing up that I saw a Dr. Pepper car blow up. What a shame. What a shame. And all I could think of was, if you've seen that like TikTok audio, it's like, God, if you love me, you flip that motherfucker. That's how I felt. Except you can't drink the Dr. Pepper because it's exploded. I would like to think that one bottle or can or something made it away from the truck and somebody picked it up and they're like, oh, yes. While I'm running from aliens, a nice, crisp Dr. Pepper. That would make my day. Anyway, I'm going to move on from that. We're going to go to technicalities. First of all, I want to talk about the way that in past movies, they have done my people so dirty. They did Natasha dirty with her curly bouncy wig that they didn't brush out. They did Thor dirty with his blonde ass eyebrows, and his wig was also pretty bad too, I think. And then the Hulk with his CGI, we all know how I feel about that because I don't like it. Anyway, this movie, they all look so much better. Natasha's got that curly bob. She's got that fuck ass bob going on, and I love it. She looks much better. And then Thor, we see him, he jumps down and he's gloriously riding the jet in the storm and his hair is flowing and his eyebrows are less bleached and he looks better. He looks good. So glorious. The Hulk design is so much better too. It looks more like Mark Ruffalo. His muscles aren't weirdly ribbed. They just really did it so much better, this movie, and I'm so happy for my people because they did not need to look like that before, and they did, and it was sad. Anyway, I have a few little details that I just wanted to talk about. I thought they were really cool. First one is Clint's foldable bow. I don't know if those exist. I haven't looked them up, but they should. There should be more of those. I think, why aren't they all foldable? It just seems more practical. I don't think they are, though, because in Hawkeye, the show, Kate is like, wow, that's really cool. And he, I think, got it custom made or something. I don't know, but I feel like a foldable bow should be way more popular than it is right now. I just feel like it's more practical for storage, for carrying places, for doing things. Maybe it is a thing. I don't know. I'll look it up later. But anyway, speaking of Clint and his bow and arrows, this is a fun little fact. When he's firing arrows and he puts them into the bow, when Jeremy Renner is doing that, he's miming it. There are no arrows. It's just so silly to think about. It looks really cool. Jeremy Renner does a good job at not looking goofy when he's pulling fake arrows. In this movie and in Age of Ultron, for sure, they are fake. And I'm assuming probably every other movie. That's a fun little thing that I like to look out for. Another little tidbit, and this is what I've heard, and I may be wrong, but I heard that RDJ, Robert Downey Jr., he hid snacks all over the set, and they kept having to take them away from him. In that scene where Tony and Bruce are in the lab and they're working and Steve comes in to talk to them, and Tony's eating blueberries out of that silver bag, you know, and he hands one to Bruce and like offering them to Steve. I heard that those were not scripted and that Robert Downey Jr. was just bringing them onto set because he would get hungry and snacky. The blueberries made it into the movie, and I thought that was really funny. I like to think that when he's offering them to Bruce and Tony's face is turned away, that probably RDJ is laughing or something. And I think that's why in that scene, they're all kind of like confused and trying not to notice the blueberries. I think it's really funny. Another little detail, but I really enjoy it, is the way that because they're all fighting around Stark Towers, all of the letters are falling in different ways due to different things, and it ends up being just an A and it turns into Avengers Tower. It's so epic. It's such a cool idea. Another thing that was really cool, very epic, I thought, was when the Chitauri throw that bomb and Steve jumps up behind his shield and he tucks himself behind the shield and the bomb throws him out of the building. I thought that was a really cool concept, and I thought that it just is so badass. There's one quick scene, and it's when they're fighting the Chitauri and Natasha takes one of their guns from the aliens and she's fighting them. She kind of does, and I hope this makes sense. There's like a red room move where she gets down on one knee and she spins around and she shoots. But we can see them practicing it in Black Widow. And then she kind of does a similar move in this movie. And I thought that was really cool because that move, if they're practicing it as much as they did in the red room, that would be muscle memory to her. And I thought that was really cool that we saw it happen before we saw the red room scene. That was a really cool notice for me. Speaking of Natasha, though, I feel so bad for Natasha, Clint, and Steve, and Bruce when he's not the Hulk, because they're just people. They don't have flying powers. When Hulk is in Hulk form, he can jump super far, so he doesn't have to walk. But Natasha, Clint, and Steve is a super soldier, but they just have to like walk. So they're on the floor in New York and they can't just fly to Stark Towers. Like Natasha has to jump on an alien ship, which was badass, but she can't just go, you know? They just have to like walk down the street. And I feel so bad for them, especially for Natasha and Clint, because they're not even enhanced at all. They're just people. Okay. The scene where Tony has just fallen back down from the wormhole after putting the nuke in it, and he is like passed out on the floor and they've ripped off his mask and he just wakes up. The way that his head moves around inside of the suit, it bounces too much for it to look normal for me. That took me out of it so bad. Just any time that the mask is up, his head moves around inside the helmet too much. And I hope that makes sense, but that's how I see it, is like, it's kind of silly. Okay, last technicalities that I want to talk about, and these are just like cinematically beautiful. The first one is, it's the classic Avengers. They're all in the circle and the Hulk is screaming and they're getting ready to fight the Chitauri. It's the Avengers assemble, right? So cinematic. The camera's spinning around them and everything, and they're all ready to fight. And then the second one, I would say it's also a classic, maybe just in my mind, when Loki's on the ground and they've defeated him and they're all surrounding him on top of him and the camera angle is like looking up at all of them. And Loki's like, I think I'll take that drink now. That is also so cinematic. It's so badass. I love it. Anyway, those are all the technicalities I have. So we're going to move on to the most chaotic moment. The most chaotic moment in this movie for me, and just because there's so much going on, is the scene where they have just captured Loki. He is on the ship and they're heading towards the bigger ship, you know, with all of S.H.I.E.L.D. There's lightning and Loki's all scared and they're like, oh, you're scared of a little bit of lightning? He's like, I'm not overly fond of what follows. And then Thor's there, glorious with his not bleached eyebrows, and he takes Loki out. They're like, oh shit, we have to go get him. Steve is like, we need a plan. And Tony's like, I have a plan, attack. This scene is just so full of good quotes. I've written them all down because I love it. And then Natasha's like, Cap, I don't think you want to go down there. These guys are legends. They're basically gods. And Captain America's like, there's only one god, ma'am, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't dress like that. So Iron Man is going down to go fight Thor for taking Loki. But Thor's talking to Loki and he's like being so serious. And he's like, you listen, brother. And then Iron Man hits Thor and Loki's like, I'm listening. And then they're fighting in the ground and they're in the forest and everything. And Iron Man is such a little asshole. He's such a little shit and I love him. And he's like, what are we doing, Shakespeare in the park? Doth mother know you weareth her drapes? The quotes are back to back, so funny to me. And then it's also the drama of, wait, they're supposed to be working together. They are obviously all trying to stop Loki, which means they must be working together, but now they're fighting each other. And then it's also so funny because Loki is on the cliff. Where else is he gonna go? He can't fly or anything, so he just sits there and he watches. And Loki, I think he's watching them fight too because he loves the drama. He's such a messy bitch like that. And then Captain America comes down and he's got his shield and Thor is all hyped up and he hits the shield and it blows the trees down and it blows everybody away. And that was really cool. I think this scene is the most chaotic because it's funny, it's drama, it's action, it's technically cool, like it looks really cool. That part where he hits the hammer onto the shield, I like that they use that later when they do team up again. I like that they remembered that. How do you forget that, first of all? But I like that they remember that and they're like, yes, when we are teamed together, we will use that against our enemies. I thought that was really cool. So that's all I have for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you are enjoying listening to my podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, it would be helpful if you were to like, comment, subscribe, probably turn on notifications. I think that does something. And then also, if you're listening on Spotify, it would be helpful if you were to follow and download my episodes and comment and like them and everything like that, you know? And if you know people who like Marvel or people who like to just listen to people ramble for however long, share it with people too. That would be helpful. I used a lot of quotes throughout this episode, so I didn't really write any down for the end, and that's my bad. But I think we're going to just go with one of the funnier quotes, which is, "Doth mother know you weareth her drapes?" Do you think she does? Anyway, if you would like to follow me on TikTok or on Instagram, I am at PHILM And if you are listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube, just know that this podcast exists on both as Philm Phuckery with a PH for both. I will see you all next week for a special surprise. I have decided that because this is the end of phase 1 and it was a very big movie, that we're going to take what I want to call commercial breaks from our season, and we're going to talk about a completely different movie that is not Marvel. It's a very big movie and it's very exciting, and I don't want to give it away, but I will give you a hint. And the hint is that the next episode will be very golden. So that's all I have for this week, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week for our special commercial break. Okay, love you, bye.